The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I'm a core alignment coach, an emotional training specialist, and also a diversity educator. And I'm honored to host a show every week that uses the platform to amplify voices from the margins that need to be more front and center. And I will just mention my guest has had a podcast in the past that with a similar mission of making sure voices that have been marginalized need to be heard. And her name is Dr. Sara Ruebelt. She is a cross-cultural, multicultural family therapist. She has so much experience in many different cultures and places. She has worked with immigrants from Iran, Afghanistan, Bosnia, Somalia, Vietnam, and probably elsewhere, and has taught, I think, intergenerational counseling at an advanced level at a university she can tell us about. But I want to invite her in now to add to some of your background. Thank you for being here.
Here.
She can add to her. So maybe before we dive into the topics that you've chosen, which we can start with definitions because not everyone's familiar with your the terms you're so educated in. So please let us know what else you would like your listeners to hear about your background and your work.
But yeah, my life's work has been really putting emphasis and focus on multicultural family therapy and psychology and research. My focus is to really broaden that perspective because not one size fits all, and it's extremely important to shed light on the diversity of our world and to fight against the stigmas that exist in all parts of the world with my profession, with my field, and the significant importance of it because our mental health or psychological health is extremely important and our voices matter, and particularly the underrepresented voices. So I'm really pleased to be here. Your podcast sounds like something I'm really passionate about participating in.
Thank you. And the title that you suggested for this show, and correct me if I get it wrong, is Intergenerational, Transgenerational Trauma and Family Impact. Yes, and I know, and I would ask you if we could have a specific focus on the people of Iran because what is happening there now.
Yeah. It's a term that's used, to describe the impact of traumatic experience, not only on one generation, but a subsequent generations after the events that's happened. And it just is a way to represent that it's the impact is great, and it's sort of oftentimes not talked about enough. It's not discussed. It's not presented, and so subsequently. The impact continues. And the reason it's such a passionate topic for me is because I have seen the impact and personally experienced it and recognize that it's significantly crucial to talk about it and to help families unpack that and to process that. And along with vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, all of this, like just the topic of trauma is relevant to the current events in Iran. Yes, I'm happy to maybe explore that with you further.
Hmm. Thank you so much. I know it's not easy.
Yes, it's it's as an Iranian American, um, to say that this has not been impacting all Iranians is an understatement. It's really, I feel like no matter who you are, where you live, whether you're inside Iran or outside Iran, it is pulling on our heartstring to witness and to see and to observe. I mean, I am at awe of these brave um, young generation who is standing up for human rights, for women's rights, for dignity, for the simple things that many of us have and may even take for granted, not intentionally, because they're the basic rights of all humans. And to be able to voice, whether it's complaint, frustration, expression, what a gift it is to live life, to have the freedom to express. You
Mm.
know, it's not a single day that ever since these incidences have come to life that I ever want to take that for granted. And it is heart wrenching to know and to be aware that some people are deprived of it in the world.
It is completely heart-wrenching. And I think when we haven't been directly impacted or haven't lived it, we don't even know what we are taking for granted. I think if you feeling the contrast is
Yes.
so much deepens the understanding of it.
Yes. I mean, um, I think the images that are received, most of us who are not turning away from what is released in terms of realities of life. Right? I mean, realities of life in this era with our access with technology, it's making it possible to bear witness, to see, to recognize. And once you recognize it, it is impossible to look away. As a human being with a
Mm.
heart, with
Mm.
compassion, you cannot turn away without feeling compelled to help be the voice of the voiceless. I think that is, if I can say anything at all, is the need to amplify the voices of the voiceless. When we can see the suffering, when we can see the pain, when we can see how far people are going to fight for their rights, for their freedom, it is incredibly um, heart wrenching to think that we can live a normal life and look away and assume that that's their shortcoming, that's their pain, that's their suffering. It doesn't impact me. It does. It impacts all of us. And yes, I stand with solidarity and unity for all people in the world who are suffering, including particularly the Iranian
Yeah.
men and women.
I really appreciate your pointing out that it doesn't matter where you are, that you can feel it. Of course, it's obviously more direct and life-threatening when you're
Yeah.
actually in Iran or other places.
Yeah.
Um,
I think we take for granted how we can express things and not worry about imprisonment, not worry about
Me too.
threats given to our family members or loved ones. That expression is just so much of a right that we exercise without thinking twice that it can it that it can possibly not exist in another realm, in another reality. Um, yes, the voices of Iran, people who are in prison, people who have faced the ultimate consequence, and also people who have been in prisons and experienced psychological trauma and torture. And right now, the main concern from in the field of mental health, whether we're psychologists, psychiatrists, um, professionals in the field who have basically held an oath, ethical professional, responsibility to not
Mhm.
turn away, advocating for the importance of the mental health and the impact. I think it's just disheartening and devastating to hear that people are being treated that way. And the biggest, I think, news that I've heard this week is that many who are undergoing severe trauma and torture, they are becoming suicidal. These are young people who are considering suicide or have already committed suicide. Um, this is unspeakable. It's just, you can't really fathom what the families are going through, faced with that realm of anguish and devastation and feeling the helplessness that they must be feeling. I think all the people with empathy in the world cannot turn away not feeling that pain vicariously with them. Vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, is definitely the impact of the Iranian community right now.
Well, can you say more about the power of witnessing? Like, I know you were describing how we're impacted by witnessing. Can you say on the other side, what does our witnessing and bearing witness do for people who are in direct suffering experience?
And I think one of the images that comes to mind that was sent to me, and again, I don't know how many people are seeing these images because it's not like the news is doing, intense coverage on these things. There's here and there, some things are coming up, but those of us who are on social media, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, and we are provided with images because they are reaching out for us to be their advocate, and I the heart-wrenching piece is when you see it and you can realize this is a human experience that I can relate to. It can be me, it can be my sister, it can be my mother, it can be anyone that I know. And to see particularly moms expressing their devastation, I mean, just weeping, expressing these horrifying images of their pain at the funerals, completely pouring their heart and saying, this was unjust. This was a life short, just taken so intensely, so suddenly, with any reason. There is no rhyme or reason for these losses. I mean, people should be able to express complaints and frustrations without feeling like their life is at risk. I dream of that. Yes, I dream of a world where we can express frustrations without putting our life at risk, express devastations, express complaints, problems, discuss our feelings. It makes me, as a professional, I think the psychologist brain of me, the therapist brain of me wants to understand, wants to bridge these gaps, long ago I watch a lot of movies. I believe in cinema therapy, and I think Iranian culture, one of their only way of expression has always been in films and cinema therapy. It's just like cinema. They produce films that depict realities, lived experience of Iranian people, and they're all based on true stories. The majority of them are based on true stories that people have nowhere else to speak of.
That's
And
interesting.
yes, if I highly recommend people who really want to understand what Iranian life has been like to really tap into the Iranian movies and films. But ultimately, not having a voice. Yes, I feel like that is something I'm very passionate about. I think that it's important to advocate for those whose voices are not being heard.
And before, I know you're doing a lot of advocacy and belong to major networks. And before we talk about the advocacy work you do and then some websites, we have plenty of time. Can you just sort of give an outline? Like, I'm thinking about the generational trauma of what Iranian society has been through the last 40 years, it's a lot to ask, but can you just highlight some key turning points that brought
Yeah.
us to this point?
My biggest, I think, awareness of the realities of Iranian people and the Iranian life is looking through the lens of history. I mean, history exists. You know, that's the beautiful thing about history, that we can look back and see and unpack major events. And what stands out in my mind, is the knowledge that Iran once almost had a democracy, but it was not. It was not allowed. It was taken away. And yes, there were so much. I don't know. I don't claim to be a historian or know much about politics, but I'm more into the matter of the heart, and I believe in the power of love. I believe in the power of kindness. That's the reason I chose this profession. And so I don't claim to know much about why and what, but I do know that history doesn't lie. And there's a journey, and that journey has impacted families, and I care about families. As a family therapist, I care about the life of families, the impact it has on children, and the way that trauma leaves a mark. There's a book called The Body Keeps a Score by the leading trauma researcher in the world, Dr. Van der Kolk. And that's the whole part of this focus, is that these events are leaving marks, is impacting people in the most tremendous ways. And it is not okay, because that impact will turn around and impact for generations to come. And we need to stand up for human rights. It's a business for every single human being. And there isn't much we can do when it comes to politics and laws that are obviously working against us. But I have seen in recent events what unity can do. And that isn't. When I think of advocacy, yes, I'm an advocate for mental health. But I'm also advocate for human unity, for inclusivity, for building bridges to connect one another, to make a difference by standing up for things we believe in together, because we are stronger together. That's pretty much, I think, the main message I have. And yes, historically speaking, Iran has a very devastating history. My favorite book that I recommend anyone who really wants to know and understand is by one of my heroes, inspirational figures, Shirin Ebadi, Nobel Peace Prize winner of human rights, really. And Shirin Ebadi's book, Iran Awakening, really gives quite the summary, along with many other books that have been published by Iranians who have incorporated history of Iran and events that have put Iranian people through tremendous amount of hardship, whether it was the efforts towards nationalizing Iranian oil, to then dealing with the Iran-Iraq war, to go through many other tremendously devastating impacts. People of Iran have suffered. And I think for 40 plus years, they have been trying to have that voice, find that voice. And it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult to go on living feeling like your choices don't matter. You don't matter. And I think the result of what we see is that level of frustration and fighting for change.
I keep thinking of people who knew it when it was almost a democracy, and how having experienced was near freedom. I don't know how you would phrase it, and then the extreme contrast and shutdown. I just can't imagine, say, being a parent who knew the difference and having to raise children in the extremely oppressive, when there's a better way. You've touched it, so to speak, and yet cannot access it and cannot see it. until now in a real big way.
I'm sorry. Earlier I wanted to refer to something. It just it just came up to my mind when we were talking
Sure.
about films and cinema therapy and just realities being revealed. And there is a movie called House of Sand and Fog. And to me, I remember being in grad school and watching that film, and it just resonated because as a multicultural, as a cultural researcher, wanting to see things through the lens of culture, it really stood out to me the keeping face aspect of Iranian culture. You know,
Mm.
it very much feeling like it's humiliating, it's shameful, it's embarrassing to acknowledge some aspects that devastates my people because they have faced so much loss, so much grief, so much what was versus what is. You know, looking at the past, the rights that was once upon a time existing, and then having to see them removed. Um, there
Yeah.
is obviously polarization of beliefs and experiences, but at the same time, what I wanted to say is that culturally, we need to look at through the lens of transformation and healing process in recognizing that some of the cultural practices, not talking about things versus the importance of talking, speaking, having a voice, um, it does make a difference. You know, what I see now is that people are more likely to talk about experiences instead of wanting to shy away from it, and that's hopeful.
Or do you see that here and there?
I
I mean, of
think
course, the revolution,
in
we're seeing that.
in different levels,
Yeah.
yes, in both here and there. You know, I'm always amazed with how much stigma still exists among Iranian community for getting support. Um, Therapy is just something that, you know, it activates that trust versus distrust aspect of, can I really open up? Can I really reveal? There's so much fear
Yeah.
in anyone who's experienced that level of I don't know if it's safe, right? If it's safe to speak. Um,
Right. What will the consequence be?
yes, what's the consequence going to be, and what what is it going to do or matter? And I do believe that um, change is possible. I don't think that I would be in this profession if I didn't believe in change. Change is possible,
Yeah.
and you know, realities are formed, they're socially constructed, and so much of what we face is systemic. There's a you know the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and there's so much that each one of us contribute to making it continue being what it is. And if every one of us make even the smallest efforts towards that change by shifting the you know the openness to speak, to talk, to receive, to listen, to activate that curiosity, you know, I feel like doors open as opposed to close. And we need that more than ever in our world because connection is a necessity. And yes,
I really believe that too. We are an interdependent species. And so much does not happen when we are alone, when we're alone in our thoughts and our minds. And so much can happen just through dialogue or just through listening. Like you said, just letting someone speak, then they can reaccess their own thoughts and begin to think anew and reevaluate their own previous perceptions and recognize more awareness that can lead to improving their lives. Just the power of listening is a way of connecting.
yes, it is. Absolutely. The power of listening and caring, the power of listening and holding empathy, compassion, solidarity, the power of solidarity. I mean, I am often asked in recent events from people like non-Iranians who want to who feel helpless. They don't know what to do. They have friends, they have, people that they care about who they can see are impacted, but they're not sure how to show that support. And it's, I often say it's really just that simple act of, I care about you. You matter. Your experiences matter. Your voice matters. All of that is just the essence of it all. There isn't really much anyone can do to change most of the atrocities that are happening in the world. But the simple act of caring, it begins by not looking away, not assuming that the darkness or the pain and the agonizing suffering, right, the vicarious trauma that it holds, is too much to bear. Because to me, I think of bystander effect. I think of when we see suffering and we look away and we think someone else will, surely help with that who can. What can I do? It adds and contributes to disconnect in our world. And the opposite of that is the act of caring, even in small doses. There is a proverb or saying in Farsi and Persian, drop by drop makes an ocean in Farsi. And to me, I use that a lot in therapy sessions with clients because oftentimes change seems so overwhelming, so far away, and they want to give up before they even get started. But, the step by step, or as we say, the baby steps, that's all that it takes is the small acts. Together in unity, they are grand. They are grand. And I think I see that in my social justice advocacy work towards mental health. I see that. What I'm doing is not huge. It's not significant. I think what they're doing in Iran, those people who are really standing up for justice, who are saying, hey, we're suffering. Enough is enough. This is not okay. But, I mean, that's incredible. I'm at awe of their bravery. But for us on this side of the world, wanting to contribute to that, being, the advocates for human rights, for women's rights, for mental health, saying that, psychology matters, mental health matters. Those choices you're making and the way you're going about it has an impact. It's all we can do. It's the least we can do, professionally speaking.
I really appreciate that you are giving everybody something to do, right? A drop. By listening, by asking, by going to read that book or see some Iranian films, educating ourselves, and then realizing, oh, there may be someone in my community who has a story to tell, who might be ready to share their pain, or might be beginning to trust others of us who are not directly affected. And just the power of it's rather than feeling helpless, it's empowering to think, oh, I can help, even if I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not whatever. We can be listeners and learn more, and then see and feel the unity, and then add to the unity.
It's empowering. It's empowering when we don't have to look far, don't have to speak the language or understand the history or the culture. It starts with understanding what it's like to be human. And we can all relate to that. It's that humanistic aspect I'm speaking of, is this relationship with what it means to be human. What it means to be human is to experience emotions, is not to avoid them, to ignore them, to deny them. Those emotions are there to make us human. And so speaking of that is the essence of connection. When we speak of our vulnerabilities, when we share our stories. I recently went to a women's leadership conference, and it was absolutely healing because it was all about sharing stories of vulnerability, revealing those vulnerable experiences that makes us know who we are, and speaks of our strength, and it takes courage to refer to them, speaks volume of that human experience, and we can all connect to that human experience. That's why it's so inspiring. I think when we read biographies, when we read other people's journey, the hardships that they face to get through the adversities of life and to come out on the other side. You know? Yeah.
I love what you said. Emotions are there to make us human. I really appreciate that, because it's just a way of saying, if we're not allowing our emotions to surface, or to let someone else's who has experienced repression and oppression and conditioned to not express because it's not safe, because you could lose your life, and that help. It's hard to feel completely whole and human when we cannot express emotions.
Absolutely. It robs us of what is absolutely normal and natural in our experience. And when we try to disown that or discredit that or disconnect from that, it's as if we are disowning and discrediting a part of ourselves. And it's like living life but not being whole and missing pieces and parts to ourselves isn't going to make us be available for anyone. I mean, not only we can't be available for ourselves, but we can't be available for anyone to connect to. And so I think it is essential to find those pieces and to connect and to make it relatable for others by sharing. I think the sharing piece is the message I have, is that when we don't share, when we keep it to ourselves, when we feel like it's too shameful, or too scary, or too overwhelming, or fear of judgment, all of those things creates more of that disconnect and that isolation that's experienced when we feel like we are faced with that alone. Yeah.
Well, let's break that down a little bit, because I'm thinking about anyone who might be listening or viewing who is still suffering from internalization of shame, and maybe self-blame, which results when you're in a repressive situation and you're told that you're wrong, period, and you can't do this, you can't do that, and we develop that mechanism to oppress ourselves and become such a strong habit. What can you say about, what are some steps out of that?
So I have a chart in my office that no matter how old you are, when you enter my office, I show you and I say, welcome to being human. It's a chart of emotions. Like, I can show it to you. It's probably here. And yeah, it's right there. But
Great.
it's basically an invitation, an open door to getting in touch with all that we feel as human beings, one of which can be grief. I mean, I'm going to acknowledge that I am grieving. I am grieving for the amount of suffering, amount of agony, pain, heartbreak, devastation, loss. And that grief, yes, it's making me be in touch with me. If I try to compartmentalize it, repress it, put it away, it's an ugly emotion, let me not feel it. If I say that to myself, if that is my narrative, I am going to not feel connected to me. And when I'm not to myself, I can't connect to anyone else who is also grieving or who's experiencing other feelings, because I'm sort of representing the idea that it's better to compartmentalize, to repress, to put away. Let's not get into that. But when we normalize feelings, we process it as they come. Sometimes I just need to cry when I'm grieving, right? Sometimes I need to have a trusted friend who can listen to the voice of my pain, of my vicarious trauma, and intergenerational trauma. But if I don't speak of it, if I don't present it, I'm disowning that for me, and I'm also not letting anyone in. So I think if I can answer your question, I would say to really reflect and to connect with oneself is the first step. And mindfulness and awareness, the key, right? Is the key to any form of change or healing, the first step is the awareness and acknowledgement of it. What's happening? What am I feeling?
What am I feeling?
Mm-hmm.
The first step, even if you are isolated, you can do that. Not saying it's easy, but that's a step that one can take even when there's not someone else to bear witness.
Absolutely. And you know, as a family therapist, I look at things through biopsychosocial realm and the impact that it has on individual through those lenses. Like when I think of what just recently we went through in our world, a pandemic. You talk about a marathon that has been, right?
Yeah.
Story of survival, burnout, impact of what it has done on not only on an individual level, but family level, society, you know, the world at large. And I think of all aspects of experiences with, you know, trauma and the current situation in Iran on the Iranian people and how it's multi-layer. Every single family may have their own unique story of how it's impacting them, the story behind their realities. The narrative of their story matters in terms of, you know, what it's been like for them. Because we can speak of it in a general term, but every individual is unique and every person's experience is unique, and it's all socially constructed. So I would really encourage everyone to give some time to the meaning that it represents for them and to get in touch with that and connect with that, because it's definitely the first step.
And is there a story that comes to mind that you can share for people to get a closer look, maybe not for the people who already are experiencing this directly, but just to help us understand some of the plights or situations?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I'm overwhelmed to even speak of it because it's not just one story, two story, a handful of stories. It's hundreds, you know, hundreds. 400 people have died. I mean, just 400 people who were daughters, sons, mothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, family members, loved ones to others. That, if that doesn't pull the heartstring of a family therapist, such as myself, who's Iranian, who identifies as Iranian American, you know, I don't know what can. And I think that, you know, when I think of 3,000, again, this is these 30, sorry, again, I keep messing up the statistics. 30,000 people have been imprisoned.
Wow.
30,000 people.
Wow.
Many of whom are reporting being, you know, mistreated. I mean, they're not doing well. These are, I mean, that's why I'm happy that the UN is doing a fact-finding, you know, sort of committee to go out there and look for facts. I mean, who am I to know the facts? These images don't lie. I can tell you that much. And people cannot look away and pretend like this is not happening. It's just, professionally speaking, it is unethical for me at this point as a you know, mental health provider, not to do that social justice advocacy on my end, because it's like I can't sleep at night. It's as simple as that. It's holding integrity. It really is holding integrity toward. And I think of history in the bigger realm, right? Like if I was a psychologist or a family therapist during the Holocaust, and there were images and true, real stories coming to, you know, my way, what would I feel? Well, it's the same thing that I'm feeling right now. Is that something has to be done. I have to be the voice of the voiceless, and injustice is not okay, no matter where and who and what laws is behind it, in what country and what restrictions exist. It's not okay. And the stories I hear, you know, there's so many, but one of them, I think the newest petition that my professional network, and these are psychiatrists, psychologists, you know, people who are in mental health, who are saying, gosh, you know, we need to speak of these human beings the way that someone like Shirin Ebadi did, who was, I think, once upon a time a judge in her country of Iran, and then she was demoted to being an attorney simply because she was a woman, right, after the revolution. And so she continued being this advocate. And same thing, a good human being who says, I cannot turn my back, I can't turn away when I'm seeing injustice right in front of my eyes. And so she did that advocacy work inside Iran and continued. Obviously, I got to meet her at my university. She was a keynote speaker. But people like that inspire me, because it does matter to do that. And I'm trying to think of the name of this person, because I really do feel like I want to mention it. There is one particular story, that a new petition that's coming together by physicians and such, has to do with, I think, a husband and wife physicians. Doctor, I will provide you the names, but they have done exactly in some ways what we're doing here, which is being practical, professional people who want to speak of the injustice they're observing, and as a result, they're in prison. And I think they're facing the ultimate sentence. And so it's just disheartening. Yes, these petitions matter. I think people who believe that no one should be treated that way by simply doing what is human to do, which is to care.
And to express.
To express, to advocate, to stand up for what's right, to say, hey, that's not okay. You know, it's no matter which context that happens, right? Whether it's a client in my office who comes to therapy and is speaking of being mistreated or abused, and my role as a therapist is to help advocate and to empower them to find their voice.
Is that the gem of the healing work, is to help people find their voices?
I think so. I think so. I think narrative therapy would also support that. You know, we all have a story, and we all have voices through those stories and through those experiences. And when we allow those voices to be expressed and to share, we feel free.
Yeah, because we feel secure. That means we're secure, right? We feel a security in the world.
Safety and security is at the heart of it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we're not feeling safe and secure, we feel like we have to hide, and the story of shame begins. And many of the flooded distortions, checklist of cognitive distortions comes to mind, you know, the all or nothing thinking, overgeneralizing, discounting the positives, jumping to conclusion, blaming, all of this. Like should statements. I shouldn't be feeling this way. What's wrong with me? Or when we question and we force things to be something other than what they really are, we're denying our very own reality. And, you know, I practice in my field from the lens of social constructivist theory that multiple realities exist at one time. And there is no such thing as an absolute truth, meaning we all have, depending on the perspective and our situation or our own backgrounds, we have different experiences. So then what do we do with these multiple experiences? You have to build consensus. That's where the bridge building comes in, right? Connecting means sharing. Here's my perspective. Here's what I'm going through. You may disagree, but I still need to have the right to share my reality.
I see we have a few minutes left, and we want to make sure that you have time to mention any. It'd be great to hear the name of the book that you recommended, and like one of the film titles, and just say it slowly in case people want to write it down. And then definitely websites. Like I remember the one from a former guest, Nushin, who you introduced me to, of cookforiran.com, for people who want to take some action in addition to learning, listening, helping build empathy. So do you want to say, name some resources?
Absolutely. I think, you know, mental health, let's start with just mental health and that mental health matters, and no matter who you are and where you are and how you're experiencing this, if you're going through suffering, if you're going through pain, if you're experiencing vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, intergenerational trauma, looking into resources to get support is the key. And, you know, I love the work of Dr. David Burns, cognitive behavioral therapy, and his website, feelinggood.com, comes to mind. But there are so many ways to get support and counseling, and really reflect on your experience and finding your voice. I also recommend journaling and processing your feelings by finding your own story and reauthoring your story, oftentimes in an empowering way, because it depends on how we tell our story. You know, it can change from feeling like a victim to feeling like a survivor, and that matters. But
It's so true.
you know, the cultural pieces, there's so many, and I feel like, I mean, I can definitely give you a list later. But back to David Burns, and one of my favorite books by him is called When Panic Attacks. And I feel like right now, the realm of our experience is all about panics.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do recommend that book, When Panic Attacks, by Dr. David
Great.
Burns. In terms of Iran and its history, there are so many good books. But I just happened to mention the Shirin Ebadi book, Iran Awakening.
Iran Awakening.
Yeah, it's called Iran Awakening, and it's right here actually. That's the book. Yeah, and Panic Attacks is here too.
Panic Attacks. Okay, that's a good title.
And yes, I do. I mean, I personally have now a social justice advocacy branch in my private practice, mostly to be professionally looking into ways of promoting mental health and advancement of mental health in terms of it being discussed and available and on the map with the impact. Like what's happening in Iran has a major concern in the realm of mental health and psychology. And so my advocacy work has been working with other professionals, mental health professionals, who are pursuing association leaderships like American, basically American Psychological Association, the Association of Psychiatric Association, American Psychiatric Association, and in the future pursuing American Counseling Association. All these associations to stand up for human rights and advocacy.
Fantastic.
Mental health, yeah.
That is so encouraging. Well, I think we have about a minute left. Do you want to make a closing statement before I say my thank yous and wrap up?
Sure.
Or just...
Sure. Yes, I want to reach out to all mental health providers out there who I know have been really holding the heart of Iranian community, and really trying to be there as their support and connecting on so many levels, that you matter too. And remembering that no matter how much we do, whether it's, in small ways or big ways, it matters, and we stand stronger together in unity. And self-care matters. I certainly provided a support group for therapists during the pandemic because it does impact us too. We're human, and
certainly,
it's a gift that we have, this intuitive feeling personality, and hold a lot of heart and compassion. But it certainly sometimes is hard to pull away and not let it penetrate. And so vicarious trauma and things like this is definitely something that should be taken seriously, and the self of the therapist matters.
That is a great message. You must take care of yourselves for everyone else too.
Yeah, well, but above all, sorry, but I just wanted to say, above all, I care deeply about all the people who are affected, who are, as we speak, going through agony and pain and suffering, facing trauma, facing loss, facing grief. That you are not alone. Our hearts are with you, and don't lose hope.
Thank you so much for giving voice to them, to all of them, to all of us. and for your powerful messages of healing. Dr. Sara Ruebelt, thank you again so much for your time. I also want to thank anyone listening or viewing this podcast, and my wonderful sound engineer, DJ, and our producer, Dean Piper. And I will say goodnight, and be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Talk4TV and W4CY.com. May we all have enriching conversations in diversity this week.
Thank you.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the